As you can see for today's video, I am going to be covering a goose gear rear seat delete, and in this particular video I am only installing the 60% section. However, you'll see details on how to install the 40, and I am planning to put the 40 in, but for now I have to make room for some people still in the back seat. The 60% section, however, will allow me to use my Roam cooler and eventually the refrigerator I choose for my longer outings. So keep watching and you're going to see an unboxing of all the parts that come with the goose gear as delivered, as well as watching the removal of the factory components and the complete installation of the 60% delete. The first thing I like to do with any package is, of course, just lay out everything that came in the package and inspect it for any damage. So go into the hardware kit, open up each of the packets, make sure that the number of products that are supposed to be in there are all in there, and then take some time to kind of lay them out, open up all the packaging, inspect the materials to make sure that there was no damage in shipping or damage in transit, but more importantly, just make sure that everything is there that you need so that you're not taking out a part, having to reinstall it, because you don't have all the parts present. Another great thing about doing this yourself is that you get to get up close and personal with the product and really appreciate the craftsmanship and the premium materials that Goose Gear has put into this product line. Specifically, take a look at the wood. It's a birch, but it's not just any birch plywood. It is Baltic birch. And what Baltic birch means is that it has a higher layer density. And if you take a look at it side by side with the standard plywood, you're going to see many more layers. And compared to a standard plywood, it could be up to double the amount of layers. And why is that important? Well, this is a deck type device that you're going to be putting a load on, carrying it off-road and strapping items to it. So it's a more rigid, and of course it actually holds nuts and bolts better for anything that's screwed into the material because of that multiple layer composition. In the end, this is one of the reasons why it's used beyond the aesthetic appeal that birch does have. Getting back to the installation, it's now time to put the side panels on to our main deck. That's going to require us loosening the T-bolt nuts and bolts and then sliding it into the aluminum extrusion. Make sure you get them all lined up and then lightly snug them into place, as we may have to make some adjustments here once you get the actual panel placed in the vehicle. For the most part though, this is pretty straightforward, and we're going to repeat this once for each of the sides. The last of the mounting hardware that we're going to use is for the two main bolt downs, and these will be the brackets that secure the upper deck to the main mounting hardware points that we took off on the factory seat. So make sure these are loosely installed, as we'll have to adjust the height when we're finished. So now we're ready to do some removal, and as you can see here, we have the passenger side of the rear seat folded forward, and you can see the two main mounting bolts here. You'll also notice two Torx bolts that you'll see highlighted with the green arrows passing through from this 40% side to the 60% side we need to remove. These have to be removed so that you can actually take that section out. So while we have the passenger seat down, we'll go ahead and do that right now. Moving on to the driver's 60% side, there are three main bolts that have to be removed up front, and you'll see those highlighted with the three arrows here. These bolts have to be removed so that the seat can be removed, and as well, we're going to work on getting that last bolt for the retainer on the seat belt, which is an optional component. You don't have to remove it, but I'll show you later where I do pull it out simply because I didn't want it banging against the back plastics as I'm rolling down the trail. On the side of the seatbelt itself, there is a white button that you can depress that will release the seatbelt so that you can remove the entire seat assembly. Sort of a rule of thumb for me is when I remove something, I try to do some cleanup. So wipe down areas that you can't reach, get the vacuum cleaner and vacuum up areas that you can't get to. Obviously, all of this will be much more difficult once the installation is complete. So as you can see, I've started removal of the seatbelt process, and it's a little bit more than you have to do. Like I said, you can just leave it there. I just didn't want it slapping against the plastics, and you can see I even put some tape on the plastics to keep the seatbelt from making noise just when the seat was there. With the factory panel, you just have to make sure that, of course, you're using the proper tool to remove and release any of the factory clips so as not to create a crease line or an unwanted white mark on that black plastic from overbending it. Additionally, there is quite a bit of clips back there, and you're going to want to make sure you get everything clear of that lower mounting bolt to make sure you can pull out the retractor for the seatbelt assembly. Here's a picture of what it looks like behind the panel. With the seatbelt retractor removed, we can restore the panel back to its original position. Just basically line up all the holes and pop everything back into place, and you should be all good and done. Next up, we're going to remove the top three screws and the rubber bushings. We will not be reusing these as we have all new hardware to mount the upper panel. So with our assembled panel, we want to put that into place, make sure that it lines up with all the holes on the top, the two seatbelt mounts in the back, and make sure it doesn't rub against anything we don't want it to make contact against, and has proper door clearance. With that said, we're going to use a supplied new hardware with the washer and put the top 3 bolts in place, locking down the deck, and then putting the 2 seatbelt nuts back on the studs on the floor to lock the rear section of the panel in place. And with that said, this is what it should look like with everything installed. And now you can spend some time to really configure your back seat area to be as utilitarian as you want. And in my case here, you can see I'm still keeping my 511 hex grid behind my seat with plenty of space. And there's even room, it looks like, behind the seat, so I can put my Duracell jumper pack with my inverter, which just gives me another power source just in case I have any issues in the field. With that said, you can see that I also took the top deck door panels and flipped those from having the latch locks on the inside edge of the vehicle to having them on the outside edge where they're more accessible when I'm standing at the edge of the door. So here's everything completely installed, and as you can see, there is an open side panel. You do still have this extrusion here that allows for that panel to be closed at a future date, but I like the ability to access, things like my tie downs and have quick access to that, but you still have the ability to open up the top panels and access those from the top as well. They just keep things out of sight, but for the most part, as you can see, I'm allowed to keep my equipment on top. I have the old seat mounts to actually use as kind of tie downs for anything I have in front, and of course this is my small cooler, but everything fits well.